Happy Halloween, my bees. Now, if you're anything like me, then you prefer to spend the night of the 31st, wrapped up nice and cozy, while scaring yourself shitless. Here I am to scratch that creepy little itch of yours. Here are 5 chilling stories from across the internet that will hopefully terrify you as much as they terrify me. All stories from today will be linked in the description box down below. Feel free to check them out for yourself. Now, without further ado, get nice and comfortable. Let's get started, shall we? Our first story is room 733. The suicide room. That's what they called room 733. As if I didn't have enough to worry about on my first day as a college freshman. We had been assigned to dorm 734, which, it turns out, wasn't one of the nice add-on rooms in the South Hall. No, instead we found ourselves in the older wing of the building, on the 7th floor. I wasn't too bummed out. At least they had honored my request to room with my best friend. Lydia and I spent most of the morning moving ourselves in. By the time our resident advisor came by, I was taping up posters and Lydia was reading. "Hi girls, I'm Beth," chirped the bubbly blonde girl as she bounced into our room. "I'll be your RA this year." "Hi," I nodded at her. "Wow, you girls really work fast," she said, taking in our made beds and hung up clothes. Beth picked up a drawing of Cthulhu that Lydia had done over the summer. She turned it sideways, studying it. "Whoa, is this the Kraken from the Pirates of the Caribbean?" Lydia glared at her over the top of her book. So anyways," the RA continued, "I know our hall isn't as new as the South Hall, but trust me, there's a lot of history here. This building's almost 60 years old." "Yes, I can see that," I said, looking around. "The rooms are pretty small." "Well, yeah, but people were much smaller in the 50s. Beth shrugged. "Really?" Lydia said flatly. "Yep, really." Beth pursed her lips and continued to stand there, and the room filled with awkward silence. "So," I said, "the corner room next to us, 733 that is? It looks a lot bigger than our room. Is anyone assigned to that room, or maybe we could—" "Oh, no, you don't want that room," Beth interrupted. "There were a couple of suicides there, a hanging, a jumper, if I remember right. They're not assigning anyone to that room. Anyways, I'd just like to remind you that this is an all-girls floor, and guys are not allowed up here after 11. Before we could reply, Beth clapped her hands with a quick, "Well, nice meeting you," and she skipped out of the room. Lydia dropped her book on the bed and stared out into the hallway. Ugh, I hate her. Did you hear the bomb she just fucking dropped? I'm gonna call her dumb shit Beth. Lydia, seriously? Suicides? Oh, Becca, relax. Every campus has a few suicides. Yeah, but in the same room? Lydia sighed. Ugh, really? Who cares? It's not our room. Yeah, I guess. I turned to study the little window in our room. Could you imagine climbing out of that tiny window and jumping? You'd be alive for at least 5 seconds before you hit the ground. Oh, for fuck's sake, Becca, can you not? Lydia glanced at the window and visibly shuddered. You know I fucking hate heights. We could always move into the suicide room, I teased. That one has a window on each wall. Fuck you. Okay, but seriously, think about it. It would take a lot of commitment to squeeze out of that tiny window. Yeah, well, remember, apparently people were a lot smaller back then, Lydia mumbled as she pushed her bed further away from the window. Since Lydia was an outgoing, friendly person, we made friends at lightning speed. There were a lot of parties in those first few weeks, at one of which Olivia inevitably met a guy. I'd known the girl since we were in diapers, so I fully anticipated her having a boyfriend by the end of September. His name was Mike, and he wasn't anything special, just your standard frat guy. After about a month on campus and the novelty of college started wearing off, Lydia and I found our stride, and we spent more weekends studying than drinking. Midterms were coming up in a couple of weeks, and I was determined to maintain a 4.0 GPA throughout my freshman year. One night in early October, I was woken up by a loud grinding sound. I sat up in bed and strained to hear it again. Lydia was also wide awake and listening. Slam. "What the fuck?" she mouthed to me. It wasn't unusual for there to be noise in the hallway since other people came in and out at all hours of the night. But this sound had definitely come from the next door. The corner room. Grind. "Is that?" "Yeah," Lydia whispered. "It's the window next door." At Lydia's insistence, we kept our window closed at all times. However, there was no mistaking the sound of the window in room 733 being opened and closed again, at regular intervals. Slam. "Who's in there?" Lydia shrugged. "Is someone fucking with us? Is this like initiation?" Lydia raised her eyebrows at me. Initiation to what? "I don't know, college? Maybe they're hazing freshmen." Grind. The window opened again. "Who is hazing freshmen?" I shrugged. Slam. The window shut. "Becca, I love you, but that was fucking stupid." I threw a pillow at her. "Whoever it is, go tell him to knock it off." "Me? I am not risking being thrown out of a window." "Well, I'm not doing it." "Hey, I'm an art major. You're a political science major. You go lay down the law." "Fuck that. Then call dumb shit Beth. This is the kind of nonsense she should deal with, right?" Slam. "I'm not calling her. Don't you put that evil on me." Fine," Lydia whispered loudly. "Then we'll just have to ignore it." "I have class at 7:30, I whispered. Grind. "Well then do something." I got out of bed and stomped to the door, threw it open dramatically, and went down to the hall to pound on the door to room 733, which simply said, "Supply room." "People are trying to sleep. Please fucking stop," I said when there was no answer. Slam. "Dude, seriously," I sighed. I stepped back from the door and immediately noticed a problem. Room 733 was padlocked shut from the outside. I hurried back to my room. "What happened?" Lydia asked. "I'm not going anywhere near that fucking room again." "It's locked from the outside. I don't know how anybody could get in there." "Oh, please, you're saying there's a spooky ghost in there?" "No, I'm saying there's some creepy shit going on in that room. I mean, it's called the suicide room." Lydia scoffed and rolled over to go back to sleep. You should have been a drama major." We didn't hear the window next door again that night. But the next morning, you could clearly see from outside that both windows in the corner were now wide open. I watched the windows on room 733 for an entire week, but they remained open. Occasionally at night, I thought I could hear a noise, like marbles dropping and rolling across the floor. Since it never woke Lydia up, I didn't bother to say anything. One afternoon, I was alone in the dorm, editing notes from my laptop. I had headphones in, but the music wasn't loud. Not loud enough to cover up the noise of someone knocking on the door. "Come in," I say without looking up from the screen. A moment went by, and I heard the knocking again. I jerked my earbuds out and slammed my laptop closed. I turned around. "Come." What the fuck? The door to the hallway was wide open. I left it open on purpose since Ian, a junior I was dating, was supposed to be stopping by. I heard the knocking again from behind me, and I literally jumped out of my chair. It had come from the other side of the room. The closet door. The closet that shared a wall with room 733. "Lydia, you're not fucking funny." Nothing. "Lydia, I swear to God, I will punch you in the face." Silence. I walked over to the closet door and grasped the handle. "Lydia, you're a fucking what?" Her voice came from the doorway, behind me. I let go of the doorknob and stumbled back, wide-eyed. Lydia threw her stuff on the bed and turned to me, crossing her arms. "I'm a fucking what?" I thought you were hiding in the closet," I said, lamely. "What? Why?" "Because someone was knocking on the door." Jesus, Becca." Lydia rubbed her forehead and walked over to the closet, throwing open the door. There was nothing there but clothes and boxes. She made a swipe of her arm to say, "What now?" I swear, Becca, there's no one in here. I know what I heard. We glared at each other until our little standoff was interrupted by the timely arrival of Ian. He immediately sensed the tension in the room. "Hi, ladies. What's new?" I gave my roommate a hostile look. "Look, there's some strange shit going on in the room next door, but that's not new." "Which room? 735 or the empty one?" "The empty one," Lydia emphasized. 733. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's the suicide room." "Right, we heard about the deaths." I sat down on my bed. "Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. 3 suicides all in one dorm room." 3? Lydia raised her eyebrows. "I thought there were only 2. "Well, there were a couple of people in the 70s and some guy about 10 years ago. He jumped out the window." Lydia and I both shrugged, although she was much worse. We were both terrified of heights. A falling death was about the worst thing that I could think of. "I will admit that 3 suicides in the same dorm room is fucking disturbing," Lydia said in an apologetic tone. "Yeah, well, I heard there's something in that room," Ian said. "Like what?" "No one knows, but every year someone has a new theory. Usually right around Halloween, something gets published in the campus paper. Whatever's in there, though, it ain't friendly." "So, has anybody ever killed themselves in the neighboring room? Like this one?" "Nah, just 733. Honestly, I was surprised when I heard that they were opening up the North Hall this year." "Yeah, they told us it was the biggest incoming freshman class in 20 years, I said absentmindedly. "Yeah, I heard that too. You know, you could request a room change." Ian sat down on the bed next to me and I leaned against his shoulder. "Yeah, but they wouldn't keep us together," Lydia cut in. "Becca and I have been friends for 15 years. We can't room with other people." "So you think we should just keep living here, next to Satan?" I glanced at the closet door again. Lydia shrugged. Whatever, at least we'll have some stories to tell after graduation." These aren't the kind of stories that I want to tell. A few days later, Lydia began to believe my closet story. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone whispering. I looked over at Lydia, who was already staring at me with wide eyes. She slowly brought a finger to her lips. I listened intently, trying to hear what the voice was saying, where it was coming from, but I couldn't understand even one word. I got out of my bed and tipped over to Lydia's. The whispering was definitely louder over there. But then she shared the wall with 733. I listened harder. "Never taken. Mouths of fools." What the hell? Lydia leaned over and put her ear to the wall. The whisper suddenly stopped. I leaned closer and suddenly there was a loud bang from the other side. Lydia immediately recoiled and clutched her ear in pain. Someone was in there. Suddenly, more angry than scared, I threw open the door to our room and stomped over to the supposedly empty supply room. I banged on the door, loudly, not caring who else I woke up at this point. "Are you fucking kidding me?" I yelled at the door. "This shit isn't funny anymore. Come out of that fucking room, you asshole." Silence. And then the doorknob started to turn. I don't know what I expected to happen, but it wasn't that. I backed up so far from the door that I ran into the opposite wall. When the handle had turned all the way around, something started to push it from the other side. The door groaned loudly, but the locks held. I held my breath until the pressure on the door subsided, and the handle slowly returned to its normal position. I noticed Lydia peeking her head out of our room. She held up her hands as if to say, "What happened?" "Someone thinks they're funny," I answered her out loud. She shook her head and disappeared back into our room. I knelt down onto the floor and brought my head to the carpet, peeking under the door crack. It was the first time I'd ever seen into the corner room. Room 733 was definitely a supply closet. There were chairs stacked along one wall and bed frames along the other. A few rotting mattresses were piled on top of one of the windows, and a thick layer of dust covering everything in the room. The windows were absolutely huge, which was something you couldn't really tell by looking at the building. They were open, as always, and I could definitely see how someone could easily climb through that outside ledge. The room didn't look like it had been disturbed for a couple of decades, which sent a shudder down my entire body. The moonlight, which had been providing enough light to see into the room, suddenly vanished, and I saw only pitch black inside. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to my night vision. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them. A large, yellow eye was looking back at me, only a few inches away from my face on the other side of the door. I screamed and woke up half the dorm hall. There was no denying that things were escalating. The next morning, Lydia and I put in the dorm change request with the resident services, and we hoped for the best. In the meantime, we agreed to never be alone in our dorm room at night. Either we both spent the night, or neither of us did. We started spending most of our nights with our respective boyfriends. I told Ian everything that happened and suggested maybe we talk to the campus paranormal society. I hesitantly made an appointment, and Lydia and I met with a small, cleanly dressed kid named Craig and 4 of his colleagues the following Tuesday. We told them everything we could remember, every incident, no matter how small. Craig and his 4 other members of the paranormal society sat quietly and took notes for half an hour. It wasn't until we finished that anyone spoke. "Is that all?" Craig asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "Would you mind waiting out in the hall for a few minutes so I can confer with my colleagues?" "Sure." Lydia smiled indulgently and stood up. "Whatever you need." The door had barely shut behind us, and Lydia snorted and rolled her eyes. "Ugh, let's go." "Go where?" I asked. "Are you serious?" "Lydia, come on, we need help. I'm freaking out. We haven't stayed a night in our dorm since Thursday. This isn't something we can just brush off." Okay." She threw her hands up. "Let's hear what they have to say. Then we can go over to resident services and check on our move requests." We loitered around in the hallway for another 15 minutes before Craig came out and asked us to come back in and take a seat. With all the pomp and circumstance of a meeting in Parliament, Craig cleared his throat and made his diagnosis. "What you're dealing with, ladies, is a very angry ghost." "Is that your professional opinion, Craig?" Lydia said. I shot her a look. Yes," he shuddered. "A vengeful spirit." "A spirit?" I asked. I very much doubted that that's what we were dealing with. "Yes," answered one of the not Craigs. It's the ghost to the layperson." "Ugh, Jesus Christ," Lydia groaned and rubbed her temples. Mistaking Lydia's frustration with despair, Craig rushed right into his speech. "Don't be afraid, ladies. We're going to take good care of you. It's true that spirits can be quite a headache if you don't know how to exorcise them, which is why it's good you came to us. Suicides almost always result in angry ghosts. They need revenge." "Revenge on who?" I asked. "On other students. Perhaps this particular spirit was bullied into taking his own life, and now seeks to torment others." Listen, we can take care of this for you right away. All we ask is a simple donation to our society," Craig continued. "We honestly didn't realize that room was having so much activity. This is all very exciting." "Great, well, thank you for your time," Lydia said as she grabbed my arm and pulled me out of my chair. "Do you want to set something up for this weekend?" Craig asked. "Tell you what, I'll call you." Lydia hurried out of the room, wearing a weary look, and we didn't speak again until we were almost at the admin building. "Ugh, that was a waste of time," she said. "Look, I'm not disagreeing with you, but Becca, tell me you didn't honestly buy into any of that. So you don't think it's a... I was having trouble even saying the word. It sounded so ridiculous. A ghost? Well, I don't fucking know, but neither do they. That guy had no idea what the fuck he was talking about." I pulled my hood over my eyes, and we stepped into the line of the resident services desk. Let me put it this way," Lydia continued. "They're playing Ghostbusters, and we're living the fucking Exorcist. Fine, I sighed. Then what do you want to do? Just keep sleeping at Mike and Ian's until we get reassigned? Ugh, I just want this to end. Lydia crossed her arms and stared straight ahead. We all wanted this to end. Even if living next to the room wasn't scary, it sure as hell was distracting. Alright, well, I mean, we probably are safe during daylight hours as long as we don't spend nights there. So we should be okay? Our room is only ghost adjacent after all, and our new assignments will come through soon. I checked my watch. Fuck, it's almost 2. Shit, really? I gotta go. Mike got into Sigma Chi and he's getting initiated today. Oh yeah, I forgot he rushed. The girl at the desk waved us forward. I didn't even realize we had reached the front of the line. Just tell me what they say, Lydia said as she ran out the door. The girl at the desk eyed me suspiciously. Hi, You're the girl trying to move out of 734 in Riley, aren't you? She caught me off guard. Yeah, one of them. How'd you know? Sorry I overheard you. Also, I saw your file come across my desk a few days ago. I gotta ask, why are you looking to transfer rooms exactly? I was tired. I was beaten down. I didn't have the energy to think of a lie. Because some shit is going on in the empty room next to us and it's freaking us out. Noises, whispering, knocking. The other night, I saw someone. You saw someone? Yeah. In room 733. Yeah, I looked under the door. There was definitely someone in there. The girl narrowed her eyes at me for a second, and then nodded for no particular reason. Well, your rooms aren't ready yet, but I pushed them through as a priority. For right now, you're stuck, though. There just isn't anywhere else to put you. I sighed. I figured as much. I'm Alice, she continued. And look, I've actually done a lot of research on the Riley suicides. I think I can help you. Or at least, maybe offer some insight. Really? I asked hesitantly. Absolutely. I'm in Taylor Hall, room 310. I'll be back in my dorm by 4 today. Thanks, we just came from the Paranormal Society on campus. Ugh, say no more, Alex rolled her eyes. Yeah, so I'll definitely see you at 4. Great, Alice said and smiled. I was early to Taylor, but then so was she. I told our story from the second time that day, and Alice wasn't afraid to interrupt with questions, though her queries did not betray her thoughts. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed deeply. I can't believe it. She shook her head. I always heard rumors about it, but honestly doubted any of it was true. I can assure you, everything I've told you is absolutely true. And how is it now, when you're here? We aren't ever in there at night, but during the day, we've heard scratching on the walls, really quiet whispering, and sometimes we still hear the opening and closing of the window, in broad fucking daylight. However, every time I look out from the street, the windows of 733 are open. Alice nodded. Well, for the record, I don't think you're in any danger. As much as it sucks, you guys are simply a casualty. You just need to stay out of room 733. I snorted. Are you kidding me? I would never go in there. I believe that you believe that. But whatever it is, it's tricky, manipulative, a liar, and it's smarter than you. I'll try not to be offended by that. You shouldn't be. What do you think it is? Something very old and very evil. I regarded her skeptically and let my eyes wander around the room. I hadn't really noticed the decor before, but I gotta say, Alice had an interest in occults, and that was an understatement. I can't see any situation where I would be compelled to enter that room. I know, but you have to be prepared that there might be a time when you have to make a decision about entering that room. Because whatever you're dealing with, it's killed 5 people. 5? I thought it was 3. Yeah, well, not everyone's inclined to do the level of research that I do. Let's see, there was Ellen Burnham in 1961. She jumped out of the window. She was the very first. And then Tad Collingsworth in 68. He jumped too. Marissa Grigg in 75, hung herself. Erin Murphy in 79, she jumped. And then Eric Dustin in 92. He hung himself. 5 suicides. How could the university still let people live in there? They don't, apparently. That's why it's a supply room. And back then? Well, every few years, once everyone who could remember had graduated, the room would be reassigned. This was before the internet, you know? And incoming freshmen were clueless. But after the last one, Eric Dustin, they closed the entire north hall of the 7th floor and built more rooms onto the south hall. So what does it want? Alice shrugged. Chaos, death, souls? Who knows? No one even knows what it is. Okay, so what do we know? Well, we know it somehow is bound to that room, though it seems to have minimal influence just outside of it. We know that everyone who ever died was alone at the time, and we know that it's a trickster. That's what we know. It wasn't enough. Why do you think they do it? I asked quietly. The victims? I nodded. All I know is what is rumored to be in the evidence files. All the suicides were found with pictures or writings that were considered unspeakable at the time. They contained horrible and evil things that would make you physically sick to read or see, they say. And these people, they drew them, they wrote that stuff? Yep. Whatever is in that room drove them insane. That's fucking terrifying. Have you guys ever considered getting someone to bless the room? Jesus? Well, you'd have a hard time getting him, but perhaps some other holy person? No, I mean, Jesus, you're talking about an exorcism. Alice shrugged. Maybe. The rumor in the 70s is that this all started with a Ouija board game gone wrong in 61. Really? That shit is made by Hasbro. Ugh, not in the 60s it wasn't. Anyways, it's just a rumor. Only one person on campus would know, and it's Tom Moen, an admin. I tried to talk to him before, but he refuses to see me. Did he go here in 61? Yeah, and he was staying in Riley. We need to talk to him. I need to know what the fuck is happening, or I won't be able to live the rest of my life as a well-adjusted person. I mean, I suppose we could chase him down on campus. Can we try to talk to him tomorrow? I guess we can try. Mr. Moen wouldn't see us that day, or the next. We tried to catch him on his lunch hour, and then again while he was leaving work, but he got around us every time. It was soon clear that the old man was actively avoiding us. Lydia and I had seen very little of each other since we continued to sleep in other dorms. I went back to our room twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Usually the other room was silent, but that didn't make me feel any better. I could always sense something on the other side of the wall, somehow watching me. It felt like calm before the storm. The Tuesday before Halloween, I came back to the dorm to shower in the evening, much later than usual. I had seen Lydia that afternoon, and she informed me that she had enough clothes stored at Mike's to last at least until graduation. So I knew I'd be there alone. I showered down the hall in the safety of the bathrooms and walked back to the dorm to change. I was supposed to meet Ian in half an hour and head to the party, but I wanted to get there as quick as possible. Since the silence was unnerving me, I threw my iPod on the docking station and turned on AC/DC. I got dressed and then stood in front of the mirror to dry my hair. I flipped my head over and blow-dried upside down to give my hair some volume. When I flipped my head back up and shut off the blow-dryer, I immediately noticed the silence in the room. But it wasn't all that I noticed. I wasn't in my room anymore. Behind me was reflected the dusty bed frames and the large open windows of room 733. I spun around in a panic to find that I was actually standing in my own room. I looked back in the mirror to see 733, still reflected there. A slight movement behind me was all it took to make me run. I grabbed my purse and my phone and I fled my room, slamming the door behind me. On the elevator ride down, I called Alice. I can't do it anymore, I said when she picked up. I can't go in that room again. I can't ever go back. What happened? I told her. Jesus, what do you want to do? I need to talk to someone who knows what the fuck is going on. Is Tom Moen the only person we know who was here in 1961? He's the only one that I know of. Maybe we could get him on his way to work in tomorrow morning. We'll just corner him and refuse to move until he tells us something. He comes in at 6:30 according to the schedule I have. Do you want to meet outside the Starbucks in the atrium? Fuck yeah, I do. I have a class at 7:30, but I'll blow it off. Okay, see you then. I wasn't usually much for parties, but I was glad I was going to one that night. As soon as we got there, I asked Ian to get me a drink. Since I wasn't usually much of a drinker, he gave me a raised eyebrow. I gave him a brief synopsis of what had happened earlier, hoping he wouldn't think I was crazy. Ian made me a scotch and coke. I was the first of many. Around midnight, I went to have a cigarette and checked my phone. I had a voicemail from Lydia, left at 11:04 p.m. Hey, Becca, listen, I had a huge fucking fight with Mike. I guess his frat decided that for Halloween this year, all the new brothers had to spend a night in a suicide room in our dorm. I just can't fucking take it. He knows what's been going on and he still agreed to do this. Now he's trying to convince me that Sigma Chi is behind all the stuff going on in room 733, but I know he's full of shit. I can't. I hit end and threw my phone in my bag. No wonder why Lydia was pissed. This was not good. Not good at all. I found Ian inside and asked him to take me home. I was suddenly very stressed, very tired, and very drunk. When my alarm went off at 6 a.m., I took everything I had to pull myself out of bed. I got dressed in the clothes I'd worn the night before and shuffled my way across campus to the atrium. Alice was already there with a black coffee in hand. Figured you need this, she laughed. How'd you know? Your texts? I texted you last night? Yeah, at about 1, you told me about Sigma Chi. Oh, God, yeah. I pushed my sunglasses higher up my nose and pulled my hood over my eyes. Those guys are idiots. Remember how I told you it's crafty? What's the point of messing with you when it can make 733 proactive? You know, seduce people to going inside. No one's been in that room for years. Can you imagine how hungry that thing is? Do you really think they're at risk? I asked as I sat down on the steps of the admin building. Yeah, the fact is, the only thing they have going for them is that those suicide victims were alone at the time. So it'll be less powerful with all of them there. Theoretically, we would know a lot more if we actually knew what it was. And we can't know what it is without knowing how it got here. And that's why we need Moen. What time was he supposed to get here? Actually, 20 minutes ago, Alice said grimly. It was another half hour before we finally resigned ourselves to the fact that Mr. Moen had snuck around us, as usual. We went to the front office, hoping to beg again for an appointment with him anyways. The woman at the admin building regarded us coldly. Tom isn't coming in today, or any other day for that matter. He quit yesterday. Looks like you two won't be harassing him anymore. We weren't harassing him, I said. We just desperately need to talk to him. And we still do, added Alice. Well, you won't get any of his personal information out of me, she said snidely, and walked away. Ugh, what the fuck do we do now? I asked Alice. Without Tom Moen, there's nothing left to do. Alice, fuck, I can't go back into that room. Well, then I guess it's good that your transfers came through. They did? Yeah, I got the notice when I checked my email this morning. You're going to Morton and Lydia's going to Tinsley. Oh, thank God. I thought you'd be happy about it. I also convinced my boss not to assign anyone to room 734. Oh, thank God. The only thing is you won't be able to move in until Monday. That's fine. I can last through the weekend. Especially now that there's an end in sight. I have to tell Lydia. I opened my phone to pull up Lydia's number, but my attention was caught by the red 1 badge over the voicemail logo. I hit play. It was the rest of the message from last night. I can't even look at his dumb fucking face anymore. So I'm gonna head home. Don't worry about me. I'll be okay. I'm drunk enough to sleep through any bullshit next door. I'm just so fucking pissed off right now. I would honestly rather deal with dumb shit Beth and Michael, my parents must be siblings because I'm that fucking retarded Benson. Let's hang out tomorrow. Love you. The message ended. God damn it. Alice gave me a questioning look. Lydia spent the night in our dorm. Alice cringed. She's safe though, right? As long as she didn't go into 733. She won't. I thought about the always open large windows in the corner room. If nothing else, the mere thought of those would keep Lydia the hell out of that room. Good, well, since we have nothing else to do you want to go look at theology books in the library? It's pretty much the only thing open right now. Sure, I shrugged. I didn't have another class until 10 o'clock. The little old lady who sat behind the library's checkout desk must have been 1,000 years old. Mrs. Stapley's eyes were small and watery, and her skin looked like it was melting off of her skull. Still, she looked kind and knowledgeable. She sent us in the right direction for books on demonology, though she gave us curious looks as she did. There wasn't much. We read everything we could, but it wasn't relevant, or wasn't in English. We returned to our desk 30 minutes later. Do you have anything on the occult? The occult? Her voice trailed off. Yes, I do. Over there to the left of the reference station. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm too hungover to use the Dewey Decimal System, I said. I don't think she likes the look of us, Alice whispered as we walked away. Our look or our subject matter? Probably neither. Within the hour, we were back at her desk, having struck out again. We could tell she was getting annoyed as her eyes narrowed suspiciously as we approached. Sorry, do you know where we could find something on seances or Ouija boards or... Now listen, girls. Miss Stapley stood up from her desk and looked over her glasses at us. I really hope this is for a class. It is, I said. It's not, Alice answered simultaneously. It's personal research. Research? What kind of research? Look, we're not gonna go mess with a Ouija board or anything, I said. Good. Miss Stapley smoothed her pleated pants and sat back down. Because I can't have that sort of thing going on here. Not again. Again? Alice latched on. The other woman suddenly looked very uncomfortable and started fidgeting with a stack of books on her desk. We may have something on seances in... Miss Stapley, we're researching what happened in Riley in 1961, Alice interrupted. And what's been happening there ever since. Well, it's no secret, is it? A student committed suicide in that room. Dreadful, but not unheard of on a university campus. 5 students, I corrected her. But you know that, right? Alice was suddenly talking very fast. Because you sound like you're well-versed in the story. Please, tell us how this all started and how we might be able to end it. End it? Miss Stapley's voice became quieter and more concentrated. Don't be so arrogant, young lady. You can't end it. People have always died in that room, and they always will. There's no end to it, so you best stay far away from it. But maybe if we knew how this all started, it started just as you think it did. But everyone that was involved is either very old or dead by now. Just stay away from that room. Concentrate on your studies. I leaned over her desk. Well, I'd love to, but they assigned me and my friend to the room next door. Maybe you can forget about all the suicides, but we can't. It won't fucking let us. Young lady, I will never forget. Miss Stapley's voice was even quieter now. My friend Ellen was the very first to be killed in that room. She was my best friend. And now not a night goes that I don't imagine her wiggling out of that tiny window, standing on that cold ledge with her bare feet, jumping off the 7th floor of that building. Alice sighed. I'm really sorry. I didn't know. Yes, well, these are old wounds, my dear. Now, girls, I'll suggest you get a room reassignment immediately. No one should be living on the 7th floor of that building. That's all I'm going to tell you about it. Alice sighed but resigned herself to a nod. We would not learn anything more here. Still, it was quite a breakthrough. At least we had some information now. Alice walked away and I made an effort to follow her, but my feet wouldn't move. Something was bothering me. A small yet crucial word that had been buried in Miss Stapley's story. A word that suddenly seemed very important. Miss Stapley? I asked the tired old woman at the desk. Why did you refer to the windows in 733 as tiny? Because I've seen those windows, and they're huge, like 5 feet tall. Oh dear, you're thinking about the corner room. That's the supply closet. Room 733 is next door to that. No, I stuttered. That's 734. Yes, well, it is now. When they built the additional rooms to the South Hall, they moved all the room numbers down. Oh my God. I suddenly felt very hot and very dizzy. "That sneaky fucker," Alice whispered next to me, her skin paling. "Lydia." We took off across campus at a dead run, witnessed only by the few bleary-eyed students on their way to their morning classes. When Riley finally came into view, I stumbled onto the pavement as my blood turned to ice. From our vantage point, I could clearly see the windows of the corner room were closed. The first and only time I'd ever seen it that way. And the window to my room was open. We ran to the lobby, pushing past several latte-sipping, Ugg boot-wearing freshmen who had just gotten off the elevator. I hit 7 and watched the doors close more slowly than I had ever before. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. "Alice, how the fuck did this happen?" "I don't know. I don't fucking know. She's been there all night, Alice. In our room. Alone." Alice shook her head but had nothing to say. When the doors finally opened on floor 7, we saw a quiet and deserted hallway. I ran towards my room and Alice right behind me, rounding the corner. I threw open my door, hoping it wasn't locked, and it wasn't. Lydia looked back at me, and for one breathless moment, a cruel glimmer of hope crossed her tear-streaked face. But it was too late. The next second, she leaned forward ever so slightly, and she was gone. She screamed the entire way down. Alice ran to the ledge where Lydia had just been standing, while I stood motionless. She stuck her head out the window and looked down, just as a different kind of screaming started on the bottom floor. Alice closed her hand over her mouth and pulled her head in back into the room, as tears and shock ran down her face. Her ghost white face. The screaming from outside got louder as more people saw what remained of my best friend on the cold pavement. I leaned back against the dresser and slumped onto the floor. A falling death. Lydia never wanted a falling death. I absentmindedly picked up one of the pictures that were strewn over the floor. It was a picture of Lydia's mother. She was dead. I picked up another. It was Lydia's baby sister. She was dead too. There were dozens of pictures just like it all over the floor. Lydia has been busy last night, and for all the things depicted in them, I cannot tell you. Lydia was a talented artist, and I only saw a few before I got sick on the floor next to me. Alice was standing in the doorway, yelling something down the hall. I don't know what she was saying because all I could hear was a high-pitched whine in the room. And suddenly, a piece of paper slid from under the crack in the closet door and glided across the floor toward me. I picked it up and studied it for just a moment. It was drawn by Lydia too, but it wasn't like the others. It was a picture of the closet. From my exact vantage point. In the drawing, the door was cracked, and there was nothing to look at from the darkness. I put the paper down and I studied the closet. The door was cracked open, just like in the picture. I squinted my eyes and tried to see inside. Just as I started to distinguish the long and defined lines of a face looking back at me, Alice pulled me to my feet. "We need to get out of here," I thought I heard her say. I never went back into that room. My parents moved my things and I spent the rest of the semester in an apartment off campus. I transferred to an out-of-state school for my spring semester and finished my degree there. Every night I dream of Lydia pulling herself through that tiny window, shimmying out into the cold ledge, standing there knowing there's nothing between her body and the terrifying abyss in front of her. I watch her look down 7 stories to the black pavement below and realize, though not accept, her terrible fate. I see the blind horror cross her familiar features. I hear the widely pounding heart, desperately trying to race through every beat of the life she could have lived, and knowing that it only has mere seconds left. I watch her look back at me. I watch her fall. It's been 9 years since that night. And every fall semester for 9 years, I've called resident services to see which dorms are open for new student assignments. Riley is always open. The 7th floor is always closed. This year, life and work got in the way and I called much later than usual. I was put on hold immediately. "Resident services." A woman finally answered. Were you the one asking about open rooms in Riley? Yes, that's me. We're entirely filled up, and there's a waiting list for Riley. But as it happens, you have great timing. I make no promises, but we may be able to get you in. We just got approval this morning. Approval for what? I said slowly. We're opening up the 7th floor. On to our next story. My dead girlfriend keeps messaging me on Facebook. I've got the screenshots. I don't know what to do. Uploaded to the subreddit r/nosleep in 2014 by Nate SW. Tonight is kind of a catalyst for this post. I just received another message, and it's worse than any of the others. My girlfriend died on the 7th of August, 2012. She was involved in a 3-car collision driving home from work when someone ran a red light. She passed away within minutes on the scene. We had been dating for 5 years at that point. She wasn't big on the idea of marriage. She said it felt archaic, gave her a weird vibe. But if she had been, I would have married her within 3 months of our relationship. She was vibrant, the kind of girl who would choose dare every time. She was happiest when camping, but a total technophile. She always smelled like cinnamon. That being said, she wasn't perfect. She would always say something along the lines of, "If I die first, don't just say good things about me." I never liked that. If you don't pay me out, you're doing me a disservice. I've got so many flaws, and that's just a part of me. So this is for Emily. The music she said she liked and the music she actually liked were very different. Her idea of affection was a side hug, and she had really, really long toes. Kind of like a chimpanzee. I know that's all tangible, but I don't feel like discussing her without you having some kind of idea of what she was like. Now on to the meat of the story. Emily had been dead approaching 13 months when she first messaged me. September 4th, 2013. This is when it all began. I had left Emily's Facebook account activated so I could send her the occasional message, post on her wall, go through her albums. It felt too final and too un-Emily-like to memorize it or memorialize it. I share access with her mother, Susan, meaning her mother also has the login password and has spent a total of approximately 3 minutes on the website, or a computer in total. After a little confusion, I just assumed it was her. Hello? Who is this? It's really weird receiving messages from Emily's account. Okay, well, in the future, please send messages from your account even if you want to discuss her page. Hello? Susan, you're on Emily's account. November 16th, 2013. I had received confirmation from Susan that she hadn't logged into Emily's Facebook account since the week of her death. Em knew a lot of people, so I instantly assumed this was one of her more tech-savvy friends fucking with me in the worst possible way. I noticed pretty much immediately that whoever was chatting with me was recycling old messages from me and Emily's shared chat history. Around February 2014, Emily started to tag herself in my photos. I would get notifications for them, but the tag would generally always be removed by the time I got to it. The first time I actually caught one, it felt like someone had punched me in the gut. She would tag herself in spaces where it would be plausible for her to be, or where she would usually hang out. I've got screenshots for 2, from April and June. These are the only ones I've caught, so they're a little out of the timeline. Around this period of time, I stopped being able to sleep. I was too angry to sleep. She would tag herself in random photos every couple of weeks. The friends who noticed and said something thought it was a fucked up bug. I found out recently that there had been friends who have noticed and didn't say anything. Some of them even removed me from their Facebook friends list. At this point, some of you may be wondering why I didn't just kill her Facebook profile. I wish I had. I did for a little while. On days when I can't get out there, though, it's nice having some of my friends available to chat. It's nice visiting Em's page. I was already a social outcast when Emily was alive. Her death turned me into something pretty close to a hermit. And Facebook and MMOs are/were my only social outlets. March 15th. I sent what I assumed was Emily's hacker a message. Why are you doing this? Why do you keep tagging her? On March 25th, I received an answer. It wasn't until I was going over these logs a few months later that I noticed that she was recycling my own words as well. Her response seems kind of lackluster here. I was intentionally providing him/her with emotional bait. This is actually devastating. But to keep them interested in their game, I was working off the assumption that the kind of person to do this would be the kind of person who would thrive on the distress of others. I was posting on tech forums, looking for ways to track this person, contacting Facebook. I needed to keep them around so I could gather evidence. Before anybody asks, yes, I had changed the password and social security info several times. Hello? 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 This is actually devastating. I don't know why you enjoy doing this. OMG, cinnamon-scented candles. Go to hell. Why are you doing this? On the 16th of April, I received this. We should make our own jam. JFK Samantha. Nah, different. No chance of passing. No chance of passing. How many? Garage side door. Side. No chance of passing. This seems like a word salad. Kind of like all our conversations so far. It's recycled from previous messages that she sent. The 29th of April. I hadn't discovered any leads. Facebook had gotten back to me and told me all the locations her page has been accessed from. But since her death, they're all the places that I can account for. My home, my work, her mom's house, etc. My response wasn't just bait. Yo, ask Nathan. It was an in-joke, too lame worthy of explaining, but seeing her say it again absolutely fucking crippled me. My reaction in real life was much less prettier. I'm not expecting my bond back. Her last few messages had started to scare me, but I would not admit that at this point. Baked beans on toast. I don't know, I just said, yo, ask Nathan. Nathan. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why you're still doing this. Please stop. Please stop. I don't know what's happening. Nathan, I don't know what's happening. The 8th of May. I don't really have words for this. -12, -15. My jumper's in the dryer and it's really cold out. Really cold out. Cold. Nathan, please stop. Cold. Freezing. I don't know what's happening. Freezing is the first original word that she's made. This is giving me nightmares, and I've only started to kick in recently. I've been dreaming that she's in an ice-cold car, frozen blue and gray, and I'm standing outside in the warmth, screaming at her to open the door. She doesn't even realize that I'm there. Sometimes her legs are outside with me. 24th of May. I'm really drunk. I miss you. Whoever's on this account, I don't give a fuck. I keep coming home from work expecting to see you at the computer. Shouldn't I be used to that by now? I wasn't actually drunk. She wasn't an affectionate girl, and it always embarrassed her to exchange I love you, cuddle, or talk about how much we meant to each other. She was more comfortable when I was boozed up. I got fake drunk a lot. Her reply is what prompted me to finally memorialize her page, thinking it might help curb this behavior. This brought me back to my nightmare. The nightmare where she's trapped in the car, cold and frozen, and her legs are outside with me. In the collision, the dashboard had crushed her. She was severed in a diagonal line from her right hip, midway down to her mid-thigh. One of her legs was found tucked under the back seat. Going back in time, the 7th of August, 2012. These are logs from the day that she died. She was usually home from work by 4:30. Alongside a couple of voicemail messages, this is the last time I talked to her, under the assumption that she was still alive. You'll see why I'm showing you these messages soon. Hey, are you on your way home? Emily. When you see this message, please ring me, straight away. I rang blank, and they said you left at 4. I'm starting to panic. I feel sick in my stomach, please ring me. Emily. Answer your phone. Yesterday, the 1st of July, 2014. I memorialized her page a couple of days after I received her final message. Until today, she's been quiet. She wasn't even tagging herself in my photos. I don't know what to do anymore. Do I kill her memorial page? What if it is her? I want to puke. I don't know what's happening. I just heard a Facebook alert, and I'm too afraid to swap windows and check it. Hey, are you on your way home? Emily. When you see this message, please ring me, straight away. Please stop. I rang blank and they said you left at 5. I'm starting to panic. Please stop. Cold. Emily, answer your phone. I don't know what's happening. Cold. Freezing. Our next story. Uploaded to the subreddit r/nosleep. My grand theft motto in 2019. Something walks past my house, whistling, every night at 3:03. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street, whistling, softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, but it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane, near the Carson Place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out. But they were never too hard on us, since we always stuck to the one big rule. Don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was about 6 or 7, and I love it. The houses are small but well kept. Good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam, and there are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together, and we would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam from back porch to back porch in the summer. It was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see that. But there are only 2 strange things here: the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, you couldn't really hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy. Tall, calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he ever isn't calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quieter then. His eyes move faster. And he tells us not to think about it so much, and to always remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't ever try to look outside at what is whistling. Not that we could even if we wanted to. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch onto the bottom of the window frame. Each latch has a small lock, about the size that you might find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't really know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her in the living room out before at 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open an inch just to peek. She's not out there very often. At least I haven't caught her very much. Maybe once or twice a month. I think she sits out there on our big red couch, just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Remember how I said there was 2 odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part either. But good things seem to happen to people around here, a lot. Usually, it's small things, like winning a radio contest, or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in your yard. You know, the authentic kind.
The weather here is pretty good and there's no crime, and everyone's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember, even small compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out, and they chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we could all tell that they were confused. But my parents knew. Even I knew. Nola getting better was just another one of the a million little blessings we got just for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed, even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, every now and then some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with a macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever somebody new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private. So I was sent to a room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was. Really exceptionally hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group of new neighbors warned my parents that the whistling was quiet. It would never harm or hurt us, as long as we didn't try to look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed. I pushed my ear to the door and strained to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone who looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again. No presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some kind of prank they played on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home. Asked them if they were racist on the account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her that he could tell our new neighbors were being sincere and that they were only trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom, and there were just strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good. Some of them were bad, and most were just somewhere in between. After the committee left, my dad went out to the hardware store and bought canvas blinds, the latches and the locks, and had them installed on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3, only to find my dad awake, sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shh motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. It came and it went, just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola can breathe on her own. She's grown into a strong and clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anybody want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring the macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took it seriously or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Mrs. Maddie, passed away at the age of 105. She lived a good long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about locking the shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila folder, whatever evidence my dad didn't let us see, I imagine it must have been awfully compelling since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son Holden to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. "Do you know who's always out there whistling every night?" Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about that," I said. "Don't you think it's that weirdo who lives in the big yellow house in the corner?" Holden said. "Mr. Tolles?" my sister asked. "No way. He's really nice." Holden shrugged. "Must be a psycho killer then." Nola tensed. "We don't talk about it," I repeated. "Look, let's go into my room and play Nintendo, okay?" We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover. But I could see that Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night and locked the blinds and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. "Have you ever tried looking?" he asked. "It's nearly time." Like most sleepovers, we conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see that he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. "We don't. See, I can't. I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night. He hides the key." He continued ignoring me. "So does our dad," said Nola. "No," replied Holden. "No, he doesn't." "You saw him do it," I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. "Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain." "So?" I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next, because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all these years, because he knew that we took it seriously. "So after your dad locked up before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to the blinds." Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. "You're joking." Holden shrugged. "You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right on the nightstand." "Stay here," I told both of them. "Don't move a muscle." I hurried over to my parents' room, but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be very angry. Beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking in a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the darkness, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly, from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the same sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think they would have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistler come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. "Nola!" I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house right now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen. Clock hands nailed to the face. But I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola and Holden in a moment. My eyes were locked on hers, blind all the way down so we could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise. I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. I had my arms around Nola and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. "Don't look, okay?" I told her. "Don't turn around." We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola, and I tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. "Holden?" I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window, eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for that time of year. I moved my hands up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further and further I reached, and there was a gentle hum, feeling back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blind shut. I opened my eyes, the dim light leaking out from the kitchen. I could make out Holden, pale, small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden?" I asked again. He turned toward me, and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then in the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale. He had bit his lip so hard there was a thin line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I've never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night. In that moment. An old, ugly terror stitch on his face. A parent's fear. "Just Holden?" he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved. I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden, and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was now the only one who looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought that she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats. They must have taken them from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugging him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." This time the knocking was loud enough to even rattle the door. Holden screamed again. Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. "Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over at his shoulder at us. "Do you think?" He was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off into a polite tap, tap, tap. "Police," said someone from the other side of the door. The voice from the outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. "Police, call the police. Police." My mom pulled us closer. "Police, police, police, police. Please stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back, harder than before. The door shook, and then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to our front door. Front to back to front, loud then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. And then something started rasping against all the windows in the house, and then the walls. It's like they were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once. Or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop!" Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I won't tell anyone what I saw, I promise. Just please, go away." We waited for nearly a minute, and then we heard it. A soft tap, tap, tap. Coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden had started to cry, like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside of their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him. Never told him that things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room. For how long, I don't know. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into the bedroom, the knock came back. So loud it was impossible to ignore. I was afraid the door wouldn't take it. So we went back to the living room and the knock stopped. Only the tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped at around 7 in the morning. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door and then come back in. "Okay," he told us. "It's done." Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. Mom and Dad walked Holden back to his house and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they all looked grim. They wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in the bed with me and my dad in a chair he had pulled over. There was no knocking that night, or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week. But Thursday, there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them pack up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me is how tired Holden and his parents look. All three had the same parlor. Grim mouths, lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember the original welcoming committee and what they said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those who live have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune, a million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe, or to share the burden if they did. I watch Nola some days, happy, young, alive, and I wonder if I had been slower, if she had looked out that window that night. Would I have looked too? To comfort her, to share the burden. I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our whistler every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things. They're too good to leave behind. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. My dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. Our fourth story, uploaded to the subreddit r/short scary stories by Reddit user Popat Skeleton in October of 2017. I present, in a small town, you get to know everyone. 23 kids. No more. That was the plan. It was my therapist's suggestion that I handed out candy this Halloween. I'd been making such progress and it sounded like a good idea. I moved into a quiet hamlet at her recommendation. After all, the familiarity of a small town should keep the paranoia at bay. I mean, it has. Until tonight. I never understood Halloween. A night when masked strangers can stroll up to your doorstep, wielding knives and axes and your neighborly duty is to open up and present yourself? Might as well stamp a bullseye on your chest. But the doctor said that this is what normal people did. So I figured I'd give it a try. 23 kids. 16 teenagers and 70 adults in this town. I memorized the name and address. None of them psychopaths by my reckoning. So I could tolerate the masks long enough to answer the door. The adults don't need candy. Teens could be turned away. I just had to hand out sweets to 23 children, max. And then I could lock up and be done with it. And then, child 24 knocked on my door. I had already thrown the rest of the candy away. I grabbed a half-eaten bag of pretzels from the pantry and shoved it into her pail and slammed the door. Since then, 2 more have come onto my porch. I didn't answer. This town is barely on any map. No reason just to come in here to trick or treat. No one has family visiting. I would have cataloged it. No double dippers. I noticed the same costumes twice. There are people out there who shouldn't be. I've already opened the door to some of them. They know I'm here. They know I'm alone. The only 2 cops in the whole town will be working at the festival. My car's in the drive. They're waiting in the yard for me to make a break for it. They'll get me for sure. I didn't watch them all leave. Idiot! The deadbolt will hold, but I can't watch all the windows. I have a bat under the bed. I have knives in the kitchen. I have a rope in the garage. They won't get me. Sam surveyed her haul and congratulated herself on her cleverness. She had figured out how to fill a Halloween pail in a village with only a few dozen houses. Throw a bedsheet on top of your werewolf costume, wear a goblin mask over your zombie makeup. Double the costumes, double the prizes. As long as the adults didn't catch on. Her classmates all reported that the ploy worked wonderfully, except for the house on Maple, which had stopped giving away candy halfway through the night. Sam peeked through the windows and no one answered on her second go-around. Then she saw a strange decoration in the garage. Why hang something like that when no one can see it? Then again, that guy had always been odd. Our 5th and final story of the night, also from the subreddit r/nosleep, uploaded in 2020 by Sam Haysom. I had a disturbing conversation with my 7-year-old daughter. Dad! I saw a zombie! I was in the kitchen making tea when my little girl came rushing in. She ran through the back door so fast she almost tripped up the step. I poured boiling water into the kettle, from the kettle into the mug, hardly looking up. Oh yeah? Yeah, I did. Its face was all pale and messed up. It was really gross, Dad. I put the kettle back down on the stove and picked up the milk. I sighed inwardly. I really had to be more careful about what I watched on TV in the evening. Rosie has a habit about sneaking downstairs in the night. Last week, she probably caught me watching The Walking Dead, of all things. She's had zombies on her brain ever since. I keep telling her they're not real, but it doesn't seem to make a difference. Sweetheart, what did we say about zombies? I scooped the tea bag out of the mug and dumped it into the bin. You know if you keep talking about them, Daddy's gonna get in trouble with Mommy again. Yeah, I know, but I saw one. I know, darling, but I already checked the back garden twice. I can promise you it's a zombie-free zone. No, not in the back garden. I didn't see it in the back garden. I had the mug halfway raised to my lips, but now I put it down again. I turned to look at Rosie. Her hair was windswept and her cheeks were a little red, as if she'd been running. Sweetheart, I put on my best, stern, dad's not happy voice. I'm gonna ask you a question and I want you to be honest with me. Have you been playing along the path out back again? I didn't really need to ask that question because I already knew the answer. Rosie is not only allowed to play in the garden on her own, and sometimes, if she asks permission first, we let her ride a bike along the path in the back of our house, the one that runs past all the neighbors' back gardens. But that's all we allow her to do. This area is pretty safe, but these days you can never be too careful. There was a burglary a couple roads down a few months back, and last year someone was mugged on the high street. Several years ago, a few towns over, a little boy even went missing. This was quite a long way away from here, of course, but it made national news for a few days until the search fizzled out, and it made a lot of parents more cautious. Rosie's getting older now, and she's an adventurous little girl, but still, you have to have boundaries. And on a few occasions lately, Rosie has been crossing those boundaries, riding her bike further than she should, not coming in straight away when we call her, sneaking out the back gate when she's only meant to be playing in the garden. I watched Rosie now. I noticed her face growing redder. She looked away from me, down at the kitchen floor, and scuffled her feet. "Dad, I only went a little way down," she said. I promise. I was chatting to Mr. Henderson because I saw him in his back garden, and I said hello and made him jump. I sighed. So there it was. Mr. Henderson was Rosie's zombie. Yesterday was the postman, and the day before it was a different neighbor. I took a sip of my tea and shook my head. Mr. Henderson, in all fairness, was a better candidate than the others. This guy lives on his own, and he looks about 100 years old. Moles all over his face. Skin like a deflated balloon. Whenever we chatted over the garden fence before, he always seemed nice enough. Just a little bit lonely. I couldn't have Rosie going around calling him a zombie. "Listen to me, sweetheart. I know you didn't go too far or anything, but I don't want to." "I came back right after too, Dad," Rosie interrupted. She was staring at me now, blue eyes large and pleading. "I promise. I even said no when Mr. Henderson offered me an ice cream because I know you don't like me taking stuff from strangers." I opened my mouth to respond and then paused. "He offered you an ice cream?" "Yes, but I said no. Mr. Henderson really wanted me to come in and have one, and I told him I had to get home. And then I came straight back here to tell you I'd seen a zombie and—" Rosie was blabbing now, her voice whirling like a motor, but I stopped listening. My mind was still stuck on something she'd said a moment before. "Mr. Henderson really wanted me to come in and have one." I took another sip of tea and frowned. That wasn't good. I don't mind the neighbors chatting to my little girl, but I didn't like the thought of them inviting her in. Not without us there. Not even if they were just being kind. I made up my mind to go around and visit Mr. Henderson later. To tell him myself. Kindly, of course, but firmly. In the end, though, I didn't get a chance. Because moments after I had the thought, Rosie said something else. Something that pushed everything else from my mind. And ended the idea that I might have gone over to Mr. Henderson's house. She said something that made me feel cold. "Daddy, please don't stop me from playing in the garden. I promise I won't sneak out again. I don't want the zombie to get me." "Rosie, I'm not going to stop you from playing in the garden, but you have to make me a couple of promises. Okay? First promise is you'll stop going around calling people zombies. Mr. Henderson may be old, but he's not a zombie." Rosie frowned. "I didn't." "What do you mean you didn't? You just ran in here a moment ago calling him one." "No, I didn't. Mr. Henderson's not a zombie. I saw the zombie in his house, but it wasn't him." I frowned. I had the mug raised to my lips, taking another sip of tea, but now I put it down again. "What do you mean, sweetheart? You saw someone in his house?" "Yes, the zombie, Dad. I could see it pressed against his little basement window while I was talking to him." Cold fingers ran up my spine. "What?" "Yeah, it was really scary. His face was all bashed up and bloody, and his mouth was open, like he was screaming at me, but do you know what confused me the most, Dad?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "What?" "Well, I didn't realize that kids could be zombies too. I thought it was only grown-ups. But I guess I must have been wrong, because the one in Mr. Henderson's basement looked just like a little boy."